Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is the Tour de France Stage 6 2022. Now, at 220 kilometers long, today's stage is one of the longest in the Tour de France. And the finish, the last 30 kilometers, is quite interesting. It's small roads up here. They got castles and chateaus, beautiful houses to look at throughout the whole 220 kilometer course. But it's going to be an exciting race. And when I mean exciting, I mean absolutely full gas all the day long. It starts off from kilometer 0, and the attack started at this moment, and it doesn't take shortly long after that we realize exactly what Jumbo-Visma's plans are for here on stage 6. And I want to rewind the tape just a little bit. I want to go back to stage 7 of the 2021 Tour de France, and this is the tactic that Jumbo-Visma is trying to employ again here in 2022. 2021, it was a massive break. Let's call it 30 guys more or less. And Wout van Aert was in there. Mathieu van der Poel wearing the race leader's yellow Tour de France jersey. Mathieu van der Poel, he wants to hold on to that jersey. Wout van Aert wants to take it. But guess what? UAE Team Emirates missed that move, drilled it like crazy until they realized they don't need to panic, backed it off, set a steady pace, and then everything was under the control through the finish of that stage 7 of 2021. Now this is stage 6. We look at Wout van Aert. He's throwing in attacks left and right. I mean everywhere he can. It's the race leader's yellow jersey at the front of the peloton, off the peloton in breaks, followed by Tadej Pogačar a lot of times, and nothing is slowing down here at the Tour de France. After about 15-20 kilometers, we're going to see a breakaway of 3 riders get up the road. These guys are going fast, but behind, nobody is letting anything go. And again, Wout van Aert is incredibly aggressive because, like I said, he wants a mirror stage of last year's 2021 Tour de France. Now up front, that break will finally get brought back after about 15 kilometers, and then another break will form. But first, there's going to be a ton of attacks, again by the race leader's yellow jersey. Tadej Pogačar, UAE Team Emirates, is following now. He's locked into every move that Wout van Aert's doing, and we see the peloton is just blowing up back there. Now, Total Energies had tons of bad luck. One rider didn't start the stage. One rider crashed about 4 kilometers into it, while one rider was swinging off the back of the peloton at the start of today's stage. They are having a nightmare Tour de France stage 6 here. Now let's get back up front, because up front action is happening all over. And I'm talking about massive speeds. They're 52 kilometers an hour, not for 1 hour, but for 2 hours of today's stage. We're going to see a breakaway now of 10 riders go up the road. And in that breakaway, Mads Pedersen, he's high on general classification, just under 50 seconds. And Jumbo-Visma's Christophe Laporte is in this move. Now, Christophe Laporte at this moment is still a threat on the general classification and ranked quite high. I want to say right now about 1:30 or so, give or take, on the general classification. So Jumbo-Visma are looking fantastic with this tactic. Now, I want to say throughout this stage, all the way up till this group of 9 has gone away, I don't mind this tactic. In fact, I'm in favor of Wout van Aert and the race leader's yellow jersey trying to make it as difficult as he can for UAE Team Emirates, Tadej Pogačar, and his whole squad. We saw many times early on today's stage with Mark Hirschi going out the back, and they're going to have some more problems with UAE Team Emirates as they're going to lose another rider to a mechanical, but that's going to come just a little bit later. Now up front, there's 9-10 guys in this group, and like I said, Christophe Laporte, Jumbo-Visma, threat on general classification, and Mads Pedersen, the ex-Road World Champion, is high on the general classification. This is exactly the scenario that you want if you're Jumbo-Visma. Okay, you got a guy that can win the stage in there, and he's a threat on general classification with Christophe Laporte, and you got Mads Pedersen up there from Trek Segafredo. Everyone else in this group's a little bit of a threat if it gained a lot of time, but they're not big favorites. But Jumbo-Visma's looking fantastic at this moment if they want to win the stage and put pressure on UAE Team Emirates. Only problem is they want more pressure than this, because Wout van Aert is still back there following attacks. He'll follow attacks from groups of 2 and 3, groups of 5. He'll pull on the front himself. He'll throw in his own attacks trying to go across up to this group with Christophe Laporte. This just is not a tactic that I like at this point in time. When you look like you were sitting pretty in this group of 10 up there with your own teammate Christophe Laporte set in there to do something special and Mads Pedersen to put pressure on UAE Team Emirates. Finally, this group comes back, and then all of a sudden there's some more attacks again from guess who? You know it, yellow jersey, Wout van Aert. I told you he's here to put on a show. This is a show of knuckleheadism, though, throughout this stage. Now, at this point in time, he's not quite a knucklehead, but he did chase his own teammate down and help bring that group back. Now, going up the road with his teammate in front of him, it's Stevie pulling as hard as he can, setting up the break for Wout van Aert. Only problem is when Stevie pulls off, Wout van Aert accelerates, throws down the gauntlet on the pedals. He's in a break of 5. 2 of those riders are like, nah. I'm not going to the line in a group of 5 with Wout van Aert, the guy wearing the race leader's yellow jersey, who you probably can't beat in the sprint, you probably can't outclimb, and guess what? Nobody's going to want him to go up the road because he's wearing the race leader's yellow jersey, right? So 2 riders jump out of that break, and then Wout van Aert gets on the front. He's throwing down. He's got 2 riders on his wheel. The young 21-year-old there, Quinn Simmons from Trek Segafredo, and then he's got the veteran who just got done getting 3rd at Tour de Suisse. I'm talking Jakob Fuglsang. So Fuglsang is a little bit hesitant back there. He doesn't want to pull too much, and he's kind of not even coming through as Wout van Aert still pushing on the pedals. Behind the peloton back there starting to sit up. Now Wout van Aert is going to go back to Fuglsang. He's going to be like, Fuglsang, this is great, man. Throw down. Only problem is at this moment, it is not a good move. This is a catastrophic move because it's still just under 150 kilometers to go. This is not a move you want to be in if you're racing for general classification. Okay, Wout van Aert, he's a monster. He can do just about anything, but this is not a good move for Wout van Aert to be in. It's an absolute terrible move for Quinn Simmons to be in because there's just no way you can win the stage against Wout van Aert one-on-one. The only upside for Quinn Simmons is he's getting the race at the Tour de France on stage 6 with the race leader's yellow jersey, Wout van Aert with him in the group, and that is a ton of TV time for a young kid. But I'll bring it all the way back before the Tour de France started when I was talking to his director sportif the weeks before the Tour. And what Kim said, Kim Anderson, their DS driving in the car here, he said he would love to see Quinn Simmons stop being so aggressive throughout the back-to-back stages and save it for one big stage when he can go in there and win. And Kim, I agree with you 100%. I don't know if you forgot about that interview or if you're just letting the kid have some shine up front for Trek Segafredo, but either way, this is a terrible move. Now, Fuglsang, like I said, he was talking back there with Wout van Aert, finally decided to come through, and Fuglsang's taking big pulls. That time gap starting to go up fast as they're getting 2, 3, and 4 minutes up front behind UAE team members. They're calm, they're relaxed. Ineos is fanning across the road going up the climb. This is going to slow the pace of the peloton, and Ineos are sitting back there trying to slow it down when I think they should have been aggressive trying to get a big break going up the road. They tried many times before Wout van Aert's final attack here that got away, but now they're just shutting things down. I don't think you want to shut things down with only 3 riders up the road, but UAE Team Emirates got one dilemma here. They got a couple teammates off the back. George Bennett had a mechanical. Now he's with Mark Hirschi, who's having a rough start of the Tour de France. Could be he crashed earlier at yesterday's cobblestone, or could be he's sick because he had COVID during Tour de Suisse and he wasn't on 100% form here starting the Tour de France. Either way, with the 2 riders off the back, originally around 3, even 4 minutes back from UAE Team Emirates, UAE Team Emirates were marvelous right here. Tadej Pogačar or the DS that's in the car, whoever's making the call, is doing a fantastic job. Now, I talked with the director from UAE Team Emirates Machine before the Tour de France started, just like I did Trek Segafredo, and they talked about how the whole team 100% has to be around Tadej Pogačar. And so Tadej Pogačar, the wise old veteran that he is at like 23 years of age, that is, he's going to sit up, back off the pedals, and he's going to wait for some reinforcements to come back. As the reinforcements start to come back up front, Alpecin Phoenix get on the front and start chasing the 3 riders up front. Now, Wout van Aert, at this point in time, he's still up in front, taking 100% pulls. Quinn Simmons pulling like a champ that he is, full on the pedals. I don't like the tactic, but he sure is strong. Fuglsang's coming through and starting to take some final big pulls up front for Israel Premier Tech. And again, he's a GC threat if he can gain some time on today's stage. Only problem is, Alpecin Phoenix just got done starting to pull on the front. This is the problem here at the Tour de France. when you're a strong team like Jumbo-Visma, you can affect the race. You can have a dramatic effect on the race, but you can't decide the outcome if you're talking about attacking all the way from kilometer 0, wearing yourself out, and then only a 3-man attack group going up the road in this break. You just can't do it from 150 kilometers out almost. I mean, we're talking 90, 95 miles after still doing a ton of work before that. Now there's going to be some more drama for those 3 riders up front, because guess what? Bora Hansgrohe's going to get on the front. That's right, Bora Hansgrohe don't like this. They either want to try to win the stage with Vlasov because it's an uphill finish. They have a couple kilometers steep climb at 12%. They're going to drop down that, and then another climb that's almost 2 kilometers all the way to the finish at about 8% with 10% sections. So the final of this climb, if we go all the way back to Tour of Swiss when Vlasov won that stage, you got to understand Bora Hansgrohe are thinking Vlasov could possibly win this stage, or they're worried about podium positions here on the general classification at the Tour de France. Either way, it doesn't matter at this point in time, because when Bora Hansgrohe get on the front, that's 2 teams pulling, and UAE Team Emirates start pulling now because, of course, their 2 teammates from the back had latched on with George Bennett getting on and Mark Hirschi. Now with 3 teams pulling at the front, at this point in time, if you're Jumbo-Visma, no matter what tactic you had employed at the start of stage 6 here, it isn't going to work. You got to hit the abort button no matter what. They don't, and they still keep going 100%. And then EF Education get on the front back there. That's 4 teams chasing. Why is EF Education chasing? Well, that fact is pretty easy to find with that tactic, because it's Nielsen Powlers, yesterday's star here on the cobblestone stage of 5 of the Tour de France. He's only a few seconds behind on the general classification, sitting second on GC. Just behind Nielsen Powlers is going to be Edvald Boasson-Hagen, and then Tadej Pogačar is incredibly close at only 6 seconds behind Nielsen Powlers. So if they can bring this group of 3 back, guess what? Wout van Aert, who could have easily defended the race leader's yellow jersey today, or, let me remind you, Christophe Laporte was in that 9-10 rider break that had a legitimate shot of going all the way to the line. Now there's no shot because you got 4 teams chasing. And when that happens, it's Israel Premier Tech's car that comes up and talks with Fuglsang. Fuglsang goes up and talks a little bit one-on-one with Wout van Aert, and I'm going to take a guess here that Fuglsang says, look, Wout, there's no way. If it goes under 2 minutes, I'm pulling the plug here. I'll help you out, do a couple more soft pulls to get you up to the sprint points classification with 75 kilometers to go. But if it's under 2 minutes and we get to there, I'm pulling the plug. I'm sorry, Wout, but I got GC to think about. So up front, it's 3 riders still pulling through. Behind, they're going through the feed zone, and all the riders are taking a feed and still gaining time on the 3 riders in front. Now, once they go through the sprint points classification, Fuglsang will say goodbye. He'll pull off to the side for a nature break and go back to the GC favorites. Wise, intelligent move here, Fuglsang. I can understand why you were chasing a little bit, because if no teams help UAE team members, possibly you could have done something on the general classification on today's stage 2. But even that, I got my doubts. But wise move from Fuglsang to pull the plug. Like I said up front, the other 2 riders, Quinn Simmons, he's not pulling the plug. His director sportif's car came up to at one point in time. I saw Quinn Simmons give him the thumbs up, and the director's sportif's window does roll down because we see it open, so there should be no communication problems between the driver of the car, the DS, and Quinn Simmons. Quinn Simmons pulling as hard as he can. Wout van Aert knows what's coming up. Eventually, the young 21-year-old Trek Segafredo rider is going to blow, and Wout van Aert's going to be on his own. Now, it doesn't take too long, because as we start getting about 35 kilometers to go, now we're going to see the Peloton back there start to stress. They're going curb to curb because they know we're starting to get into the hilly, narrow up and down sections here at the Tour de France, and the last thing you want to do is be somewhere in the back when Tadej Pogačar starts throwing in attacks when the climbing starts. Up front, the 2 riders start to separate. Wout van Aert looks over his shoulder, could see Quinn Simmons is hurting, and he starts to accelerate on the pedals. There, Quinn Simmons can't do anything about it. The 21-year-old gave everything he had on today's stage. I hope he didn't give everything he had for the rest of the Tour de France stages, because this kid, Quinn Simmons, could have easily won a stage here at the Tour de France if he had just been a little more patient and picked a better opportunity with bigger numbers in the front breakaway, other than riding with Wout van Aert one-on-one. Wout van Aert's going solo right now, but he's only got a minute lead. We can see the writing on the wall. The group behind certainly will catch Wout van Aert. At this point in time, guys, remember, you could hit the abort button at any point in time. Could have hit the abort button to change the plans when there was 9-10 rider group with Christophe Laporte in that move and Mads Pedersen. You could have hit the abort button when Bora Hansgrohe jumped on the front. You could have hit the abort button when UAE Team Emirates teammates came from the back and started pulling. And you could have hit the abort button again when it was EF Education getting on the front chasing with 4 teams back there. Wout van Aert, what are you thinking? Sure, you can put on a show, but how much will this affect your form later in the Tour de France? And can you keep the race leader's yellow jersey? 15 kilometers to go. It starts getting exciting back there in the peloton. All that fighting we're going to see just on the left side of the road. It's Primož Roglič going off of the road. He tries to hop back on. As he was going off the road, Sepp Kuss, I believe it is, was wise. He just went all the way off the road and slightly down in the ditch. Primož Roglič fought it, tried to get back up on the road, and then smacked into the rider as the bike went sideways. Luckily, Primož Roglič holds it up just barely. You see him balancing with his leg out. Only problem is it caused a chain reaction behind and crashed all over, as we see the Lotto Soudal rider fly off the ditch along with the FDJ riders. Now, Valentin Madouas does a great job of getting back up to the front so that he can help Davide Gaudu, the race leader here for FDJ. The battle is intense in the peloton, and they're bringing back Wout van Aert with about 11 kilometers to go. At 9.5 kilometers, we see Tadej Pogačar in the picture. He's in a perfect position. He's near the front. They start to go in the right turn. There's a little island right there, and it's Bora Hansgrohe that tangles up with the Jumbo-Visma rider. And right there, Vlasov is on the ground. Luckily for Alexander Vlasov, he's got teammates all around him, and his teammates will surround him, put his chain back on, and then start pushing him and getting him going back up to the back of the GC favorites. Because, guys, we only got 8 kilometers to go, and we're getting into the meat of the finishing climbs here at the Tour de France. Now up front, it's Bike Exchange. They're riding in mass because they got Michael Matthews here, and they want to win the stage badly to get their second stage win at this year's Tour de France. As we get into the meat of the next and final KOM climb, we're going to see it's Thies Benoot on the front. Now, this is a no-no, Thies Benoot, Jumbo-Visma. What are you guys doing? You attacked all day early. You attacked when you had your teammate in that group of 9 or 10 riders, Christophe Laporte. You attacked with Wout van Aert going up the road with 2 guys, then with 1 guy, then solo by himself, and now Thies Benoot is pulling on the front like crazy. Only problem is Tadej Pogačar still in the group. At this point in time, go back to the original plans at kilometer 0. Attack them left and right, but don't pull Tadej Pogačar on the steep climbs. Instead, Thies Benoot's up there until finally he blows. And then we see Alexi Viermos, Total Energy throwing in attack. Alexi Viermos, man, this is exciting. Let me remind all of you guys when this stage started. They were 1 rider short, another rider crashed, 1 rider was hanging on for dear life at the back of the group. Peter Sagan didn't have any form. He's dropped out, probably affected from his crash yesterday. And now Alexi Viermos is flying the flag for Total Energy, going solo with only 4 kilometers to go. Over the top of that climb, we saw some excitement in the back as Tadej Pogačar lit everybody up. It's a small little group, and they drop Neilson Powless, the American rider, who could be the next yellow jersey wearer here for EF Education. Neilson Powless will find his way back onto that front group, but up front, it's Alexi Viermos, Total Energy, bombing down the descent, taking maximum risk. Going into the last final 2-kilometer climb to the finish. He'll come through the chicane, and then at about 1.5 kilometers to go, guess what? He's getting caught, and who's coming to the front? We saw him along with Tadej Pogačar at Tour of Slovenia. It's Rafael Majka and the American Brandon McNulty solidly locked onto his wheel with Tadej Pogačar. 3 UAE Team Emirates. Now, guys, remember, stage 2, Stage 3, Stage 4, Stage 5. We haven't seen UAE Team Emirates up at the front of the Tour de France as a team protecting UAE Team Emirates. Tadej Pogačar, race leader, but now we're coming to the finish with 1.5 kilometers to go. Rafał Majka is showing what he's built for. He is a climber. We saw him dominate at the Tour de France last year, and Rafał Majka is dominating here at the finish of Stage 6. After they dislodged and sent Wout van Aert in the yellow race leader's jersey out the back. Up front with 1 kilometer to go. Now it's Brandon McNulty time. Brandon McNulty's sitting down, pushing hard. This is a big boy with a lot of power, and he's got the field strung out with Tadej Pogačar locked on his wheel. They'll come out of the bend with about 400 meters to go. He'll start to slow, and then it's Primož Roglič, Jumbo-Visma. He crashed hard yesterday, dislocated his shoulder. There's no doubt about how good these riders from Jumbo-Visma can ride as Primož Roglič is throwing in a massive acceleration. Tadej Pogačar sees it coming, latches on to his Slovenian compatriot's wheel as then Primož goes hard all the way to the left because it's a left bend to the finish. Then with about 200, 175 meters to go, Tadej Pogačar is accelerating off his wheel. With 100 meters to go, Tadej Pogačar sits up, looks back, knows he's got Stage 6 won, and the yellow jersey wraps up as he crosses the line. Behind for second on the stage is going to be Michael Matthews. Again, a top podium place for Michael Matthews, but the guy just can't seem to get a win. The big surprise for the podium, though, has to be David Gaudu from FDJ, who rounds out the podium here. Now, guys, after the stage, Jumbo-Visma Grisha, the manager, director sportif here for Jumbo-Visma, he gave an interview and said, unfortunately, it didn't work out. Well, unfortunately, it's 3 guys up the road with 150 kilometers to go in today's stage. The problem is, when you attack from 10 kilometers out, like on Stage 4 in Summit Solo, it takes a long time for teams to get organized. When you attack from 150 kilometers out and you've been attacking from 220 basically to begin with, now all the time teams have a lot of time to think about things. When you're up the road there as Wout van Aert, you got to ask yourself with EF Education, Nielsen Palace's team, after that fabulous showing on the cobblestone stage yesterday, now sitting second on the general classification. If you time it just right, you can pull back Wout van Aert, send him out the back after 210 kilometers of racing, and now all of a sudden EF Education Palace has a chance to be in yellow. So you know they're going to chase. You know Michael Matthews Bike Exchange is going to do some effort if you can just stay close to the race leader of Wout van Aert up there too. So there's just too much to gain here at chances of winning the stage, chances of yellow jersey switching, and then of course UAE Team Emirates, they'll take some time bonuses on the stage and take the race leader's yellow jersey too if they have that option, and it's Tadej Pogačar, so you know he never turns it down. So when you hear the interview from Grisha from Jumbo-Visma, and he talks about how it just didn't work out, of course it didn't work out. You didn't hit the abort button. Man, you had Christophe Laporte in a group of 9-10 riders with Mads Pedersen. What were you guys thinking? And then, okay, you bring it back. Wout van Aert's up there. Hit the abort button. You had 120 kilometers to hit the abort button, something in that range, and you could always go back. You can win the stage with Wout van Aert. You can still put pressure on another day and time here at the Tour de France. Instead, Wout van Aert's lost massive time and the race leader's yellow jersey for zero reason, in my opinion, here on the Butterfly Effect. Make sure you guys like and subscribe because there's knuckleheads all over when we're talking the Tour de France. Jumbo-Visma was just the highlight of today's 220-kilometer stage. And I'll see you guys on the next Butterfly Effect real soon for Stage 7 plunge, the Belfi Summit finish here at the Tour de France. Like and subscribe. See you then.